There are stories whispered in the dark, stories that never made it to the newspapers, yet they linger in the hearts of those who live through them. This is not just a tale of a school, it is the tale of blood, of secrets buried beneath the foundation of learning, of cries that echoed through empty corridors when the world was silent. Tonight, I will take you to a polytechnic, one built in love but cursed in mystery. What happened there will shake you to your core. So listen carefully and do not turn away, for this story demands to be told. In the heart of the southwest, tucked behind busy streets and farmlands, stood a private polytechnic with beautiful buildings and modern facilities. To a visitor, it looked like a place of hope, a citadel where dreams were nurtured. But those who studied there knew there was a dark secret hidden within the walls. Long before the school was built, the land had been a thick forest. Hunters spoke of strange shadows that moved between the trees. Elders warned that the forest was home to spirits who hated intrusion. When bulldozers came to clear the land, they said a demon was forced out of its ancient dwelling. Its voice was never heard, but its anger was soon felt. At first, the polytechnic grew quickly. Students from all parts of Nigeria came to study there. But then, the deaths began. Each year without fail, at least one student died in a way that made no sense. Some were accidents too small to kill. A boy stumbled on a staircase, hit his head lightly, and never woke up. A girl riding on a bike within the school compound fell in what seemed like a harmless sleep, but she was gone before they reached the clinic. Whispers spread among the students. They said the demon of the forest has demanded in sacrifice, one soul for every section. That particular spot where the death often happened became dreaded. By day it looked normal, just another path in the hot sun. But those who walked through it swore they felt an eerie chill crawl across their skin even at the peak of noon. The school management tried everything. Local priests and traditionalists were invited to pour libations. White cloth, goats, palm oil, and incantations filled the air one night. But the following semester, death returned. Christian pastors prayed and anointed the land. The owner of the school himself, a man of great wealth, who also ran a school in Hogori, spent millions trying to cleanse the land. Still, blood was spilled every year. By 2021, the fear had grown so strong that students avoided walking alone. Some parents withdrew their children after hearing the stories. Others kept quiet, afraid of starting admission process all over again, but secretly prayed that their children would not be the one chosen. The land itself seemed to mock every effort. It was as if an invisible hand had written a covenant long ago, demanding that the soil must drink innocent blood before the year could end. The owner of the polytechnic wept in secret. His dream was to build a legacy, a place of knowledge that would outlive him. But instead, his school name was whispered with fear. And yet, he never gave up. He hoped one day someone would finally break the curse. Until then, every semester felt like walking through the valley of the shadow of death. The new academic section began with joy and laughter. Fresh students streamed into the polytechnic with dreams in their eyes, clutching admission letters like prized treasures. The campus buzzed with laughs. Markets outside the gates, students rushing to lectures, and the sound of generators humming in the night. But behind the noise, there lingered an unspoken dread. The returning student knew what the fresher did not. Before the section ended, one of them would not return home alive. Among the fresh students was a boy named Tunde, tall, full of energy, and always wearing a smile. He quickly became loved by his classmates. He was known for helping others with assignments and lifting everyone's spirits with jokes. To many, he was the kind of person who carried light wherever he went. But one hot afternoon, the whispers began. Tunde had been seen walking across the dreaded path, the very spot everyone warned fresh students to avoid. He laughed it off, saying, "Nothing did happen. All those stories are just fear." His friends scolded him, but Tunde was stubborn. That evening, tragedy struck. Tunde was playing football on the school field, his laughter echoing across the crowd. Suddenly, he slipped. It was not a violent fall, just a light stumble on the grass. Students rushed to him, expecting him to stand up with a grin, but instead his body went limp. His eyes rolled back, his chest stopped moving. Panic spread like wildfire. The players carried him to the school clinic, praying and shouting, "Doctor, abeg help am. Na small fall e fall o." Nurses fought to revive him. The doctor tried everything, but in less than 20 minutes, the boy who had been full of life was declared dead. The campus broke into chaos. Students wailed. Girls fell to the ground in shock. His roommates tore their shirts screaming, while him. WhatsApp group filled with cries and disbelief. No one could understand how a harmless fall could take a young life. That night, the hostel was silent. Even those who did not know Tunde personally cried quietly into their pillows. Fear returned with double force. If someone as strong and joyful as Tunde could be taken, then no one was safe. The management tried to calm the storm. They released an official statement stating the cause of death is not to be ascertained, but investigations are ongoing. We urge all students to remain calm. But calm was impossible. Everyone knew what had happened. The land had claimed its sacrifice for the year. In the following days, the once busy path became deserted. Students walked long distances around it. Even under the scorching sun, some even transferred to other schools, unwilling to gamble with faith. And though the owner of the Polytechnic paid for Tunde's burial and supported his grieving family, he could not wash away the stain the death had left. The ground had drunk his blood again, and this time, it broke something deep in the hearts of the students. The campus never recovered from Tunde's death. Weeks passed, but the echo of his laughter still haunted the corridors. Students spoke of him in hushed tones, their voices heavy with sorrow. At night, whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? He was taken. The land has drunk again." Parents began to panic. Calls poured into the school office, demanding answers. How does a child die from a fall? One mother shouted over the phone, her voice breaking into sobs. Some parents traveled down in person, storming the school gates with anger and tears. They gathered in groups, carrying placards that read, "Protect our children. Stop taking innocent blood." The owner of the school, Chief Adeyemi, felt the pressure like a mountain on his shoulders. He was a man of wealth and influence, the founder of several institutions across Nigeria and abroad. His Polytechnic in Hogori was a model of excellence, untouched by scandal. But here, in his homeland, his legacy was tainted with blood. Every year he had cried. He had hired traditional priests who chanted incantation under moonlight, spilling the blood of goats and rams on the cursed ground. He had called Christian pastors who fasted and prayed, anointing the soil with oil and holy water. He even built a chapel on campus, hoping that the presence of worship would silence the cries of the unseen. But no effort seemed enough. Now the situation was worse than ever. Students were threatening to withdraw. Parents were writing petitions, and social media was ablaze with rumors. "Stay away from that school. people wrote. Every year, a student must die there. It cost. Chief Adeyemi sat in his office late at night, staring at the portrait of his late wife on the wall. He whispered, "I only wanted to build a place of knowledge, a place that will lift generations out of poverty. Why has this land turned against me?" His eyes filled with tears. For all his wealth, he was helpless against the unseen. Meanwhile, fear spread deeper among the students. They avoided the path even during the day, choosing instead to walk long distances under the hot sun. Some carried charms, strings tied around their waist or wrist for protection. Others prayed loudly whenever they passed near the area, muttering psalms or reciting Quranic verses. But still, the atmosphere was thick with dread. It was as if the land itself was alive, watching, waiting, hungry for its next victim. The death of Tunde had also created spiritual unease. Some students reported hearing footsteps behind them when no one was there. Others claimed to see shadows darting between trees. One girl swore she heard a voice whisper her name when she passed the dreaded path at noon. The fear was no longer just about the death. It was about the presence. The unseen had marked the campus as its own. And deep inside, even the strongest students began to wonder who would be the next. The semester moved on, but the wound of Tunde's death remained open. To ease the tension, the Students' Union organized a night of worship and music, hoping that joy could drive away fear. The hall was packed that evening. Students sang, clapped, and lifted their hands in prayer. For a brief moment, the Polytechnic felt alive again. But then, the atmosphere shifted. It began with a sudden silence, as if the air itself had been sucked out of the room. The microphone stretched, lights flickered, and a chilling wind swept through the hall. Some students laughed nervously, thinking it was just a power issue. But then, a girl in the front row screamed. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling, as she pointed towards the doorway. At the entrance, a dark shadow lingered. It had no clear shape, but it stood tall and heavy, as if darkness itself had taken form. Students froze. A few fainted. The choir stopped singing mid-song, their voices dying in their throats. The shadow drifted into the hall. With every step, the temperature dropped. Students clutched each other, whispering prayers through tears. One boy shouted, "Blood must flow again. Run!" Panic erupted. Chairs tumbled. People trampled over one another in a desperate rush to the exit. In the chaos, a girl named Ifeoma fell. She was known for her beautiful voice in the choir. And that night, she had been leading the worship. As she struggled to rise, she let out a piercing cry. Her eyes rolled back, her body shaking violently on the floor. Students tried to pull her up, but her skin burned hot, as if fire raged inside her. Then, with a voice not her own, she screamed, "This land is mine, one soul every year, until the debt is paid." The entire hall froze. Terror gripped every heart. Those who heard her dropped her in shock. Stumbling backward, the voice echoed, deep and guttural, nothing like the gentle Ifeoma they knew. Moments later, she went still, her body limped and cold. Students wailed, some screaming her name, others running out of the hall as if death itself was chasing them. By the time the clinic staff arrived, Ifeoma was gone. Another life claimed, another soul added to the count. The next morning, the campus was like a graveyard. No one spoke above a whisper. Some packed their bags to leave, too frightening to remain another day. WhatsApp group were flooded again with messages like, "It happened again. The demon spoke through her." Chief Adeyemi heard the news and locked himself in his office. He buried his face in his hands, trembling. "Oh God," he whispered, "why won't this cause end? How much more blood will this land demand?" The Polytechnic that was meant to be a light of knowledge was now a valley of fear. Students no longer counted semester, they counted souls. And though they tried to hide it, everyone knew the truth. The shadow was not finished yet. For years, management fought tirelessly to keep the strange death from leaking into the media. Whenever a student died, the official statement was carefully written. A tragic accident, an unforeseen illness, or a misstep. Any staff who spoke too openly was silenced with threats or with fat envelopes of money. The few who tried to share the truth outside the school walls were quickly branded liars. People dismissed them, saying it's propaganda. They just want to tarnish the reputation of a well-respected institution. After all, the Polytechnic carried prestige. It was known across the country, admired for its facilities, and even linked to its own twin school in Hogori. Who would believe that behind the glitter was a shadow of death? But while the world mocked the rumors, the owner of the school, Chief Adeyemi, wept in secret. This was not just any polytechnic to him. He had built it with his own hands, pouring his wealth into it, naming it after his beloved late wife, Fumilayo. To him, the school was more than building. It was the living memory of the woman who had stood by him during poverty and success. Yet every death on that campus felt like a knife piercing his heart. He had tried to hide it from the world, but at night he knelt in his office and prayed, whispering through tears, "Fumi, forgive me. I wanted this place to honor your name, but it has become a graveyard for children." There were nights he resolved to shut down the school completely, to sell the land and sacrifice his dream. "Better to lose my legacy than waste more innocent blood," he told himself. But each time his management would persuade him otherwise. "Chief, don't throw away all you worked for. This is just an attack. We will solve it. Don't give in." Their voices drowned his own conscience, leaving him torn between love for his wife's memory and the burden of the cause. It was in the middle of this torment that Emmanuel, the son of Reverend Father Chukwudi, gained admission. To the school, it was another bright student joining their ranks. To the father, it was a call to war. When admission lists were released for the new section, joy returned to many families. Among them was Reverend Father Chukwudi, a devoted priest who had served God faithfully for over 2 decades. His only son, Emmanuel, had secured a place at the Polytechnic. The young man was brilliant, humble, and full of dreams. His father blessed him with pride, saying, "Go and shine, my son. You are the light of God." But beneath his joy, Father Chukwudi felt a strange unease. He had heard rumors about the school, the mysterious death, the whispers of a cursed land. But like many, he dismissed them as exaggerations. God is greater than any curse, he told himself. Yet in the stillness of the night, when he prayed alone in the chapel, a shadow crept into his spirit. One night, he had a vision. In his dream, Emmanuel was walking along a bright path on campus, laughing with friends. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A shadow rose from the ground, wrapping itself around his son. Emmanuel cried out, "Papa, Papa!" His voice echoed with terror as the darkness pulled him down. The priest woke up with a scream, his heart pounding, sweat drenched his cassock. He fell to his knees immediately. "No, Lord, not my son, not this school. If there is indeed a covenant of blood on that land, then let your fire destroy it." From that night, Father Chukwudi fasted. He spent hours on his knees, praying with tears. His parishioners noticed the fire in his eyes as he preached about deliverance and the power of God to break ancient chains. He was no longer just a priest, he was a warrior preparing for battle. Meanwhile, Emmanuel settled in campus life. He was loved by classmates for his kindness and humility. But whispers of the curse reached his ears quickly. One of his roommates warned him, "Stay away from that path. Don't even look at it, brother." Emmanuel smiled gently. "I am covered by the blood of Jesus," he replied. Still, late at night, he called his father, confessing that he sometimes felt a strange chill whenever he walked near the dreaded spot. "Don't worry, my son," Father Chukwudi told him, though his own heart trembled. "The Lord has already revealed what must be done, and he will not fail." The tension grew heavier as the semester rolled on. Students whispered that the land would soon demand another sacrifice. The fear was so strong that some avoided lectures scheduled near the coast area. They lived as if waiting for a bomb to explode. Father Chukwudi could not ignore the signs. With permission from the school authorities, he traveled to the campus. When he stepped onto the grounds, he felt it immediately. The heaviness in the air, the silent cry of blood demanding more blood. But he also felt something else rising within him, holy anger. He raised his hand towards the sky and whispered, "This covenant ends now." What the school could not stop with wealth, tradition, or human efforts, heaven was about to confront. When Father Chukwudi arrived on campus, the unseen power stirred. Students said the air grew heavy that morning, as if the land itself knew an enemy had entered. The priest walked straight to the dreaded spot. He stood there for hours, praying in tongues, tears rolling down his face. He did not pray softly. His voice thundered like a lion, rebuking every covenant made with blood. That night, he led a vigil in the open field. Hundreds of students gathered, some doubtful, others desperate for hope. As the prayers rose, the ground shook faintly, like drum beats under the feet. Shadows moved at the edge of the field, watching, resisting. Emmanuel felt a chill run through him, but his father laid a hand on his shoulder. "Fear not, my son," he whispered. "Tonight, the chains must break." Then at midnight struck, a wind howled through the campus, and fire, unlike any earthly fire, descended upon the course path. Students screamed, some falling to their knees in awe. The land itself seemed to convulse, groaning as flames consumed the spot where so many had died. The battle had begun. The midnight vigil grew intense. The voices of students lifted into the heavens, some shouting in desperate cries, others weeping as they called on God for mercy. Father Chukwudi stood firm at the center, his Bible raised high. Emmanuel knelt beside him, trembling, yet filled with courage. Suddenly, the ground beneath the course path split open with violent crack. A foul stench rose into the air, and a roar echoed across the campus. Students screamed as a dark figure surged upward, towering and shapeless, its voice like thunder. "This land is mine, for blood was promised, and blood shall always flow." Panic rippled through the crowd. Some fainted, others tried to run. But Father Chukwudi's voice rang out like a sword. "You lie, spirit of darkness, for it is written, whom the Son set free is free indeed. This land belongs to the Lord." The demon hurled, stretching his shadowy arms towards the crowd. But the flames of an unseen light burst forth, cutting each reach. Fire cycled the praying students, a wall no darkness could cross. The ground shook harder, as though the very soil fought to keep its grip on innocent lives. Chief Adeyemi arrived at the scene, tears streaming down his face. He fell on his knees crying, "Oh God, if this land must take blood, take mine instead. Spare these children." His cry pierced the night, breaking the heart of everyone present. For years he had hidden, covered, and wept in silence. But tonight, his soul was bare before heaven. At that moment, Father Chukwudi dropped to his knees too, lifting both hands high. Father, hear this cry of a broken man. Remember the blood of your son shed on the Calvary. Let it speak louder than the blood that cries from this land. The crowd echoed in one voice, let the blood of Jesus speak. Let the blood of Jesus speak. Then it happened. A blinding light flashed across the sky, brighter than lightning, and a roll of fire descended. The cursed path ignited, flames racing along the ground as though heaven itself had poured its wrath upon it. The dark figure shrieked, writhing in agony. No, this covenant cannot be broken, it cried. But the fire consumed it, tearing the shadow apart until nothing remained but ashes in the wind. The ground, once heavy with death, grew still and silent. The eerie chill vanished, replaced with a peace so deep that even the most fearful students fell on their faces, worshipping. For the first time in years, the land was free. When dawn broke, the cursed spot was unrecognizable. Where death once reigned, the soil glowed blackened by holy fire. No more shadows, no more whispers, no more fear. Students walked past with tears in their eyes, touching the ground as if to confirm it was real. Chief Adeyemi stood quietly, his face wet with tears. Fumi, he whispered to the memory of his late wife, your school is finally clean. For the first time in decades, he smiled. The storm had passed. The night of groaning prayers and fierce deliverance was over. For the first time in each semester, the Polytechnic campus lay in silence. No cries, no collapsing students, no restless shadows whispering in the dark. Inside the school management office, the members of the governing council sat, exhausted and shaken. The registrar rubbed his palms together nervously. The dean of students wiped his face with a handkerchief, his body still trembling for what his eyes had witnessed the night before. Parents sat quietly, some with their heads bowed in silent prayers. At the far end of the table sat Reverend Father Chukwudi, the man who had led the prayers that drove back the darkness. He was stained with oil and dust, his face weary but calm. Everyone turned to him, waiting for his speech. Finally, they broke the silence. Father, please, we need to know, where did all this start? What kind of evil have we been fighting? The Reverend Father lifted his eyes. His voice was low, deep, and heavy with the weight of history. That land was not an ordinary ground. It was called Ani Nkume, a stone land, a place soaked in blood, heavy with secrets, and bound by an ancient curse. Many years ago, he began, long before the Polytechnic was built, before the government carved roads into the village. Ani Nkume was feared. Children never played there. Hunters never set traps there. It was called the land of stone hearts, a ground where no laughter grew. In the days of the old, the village had no prison. When someone shed innocent blood, when a woman was caught in abomination, or when betrayal too great shook the land, there was only one punishment: banishment into Ani Nkume. To be banished was to walk into death. No food, no fire, no return. The forest swallowed such souls, and the village moved on. But among the many who were sent away, one man's story refused to die. His name was Odogu, a hard-working farmer, tall, broad-chested, who was known in working in a rich man's house and known for his honesty. He had a wife who loved him and children who looked up to him. But envy is a poison. When the son of a wealthy man fell sick and died, tongues whispered, fingers pointed, and though no proof was found, The council accused Odogwu of poisoning him. He pleaded his innocence. His wife wailed. His children clung to his legs. But the elders, blinded by the power of the rich man, cast their verdict. Odogwu was led to an nkume. Standing at the forest edge, Odogwu did not beg. He lifted his hands to the heavens and swore, "If truth can die in the land, then let vengeance live forever. As I am cast into an nkume in shame, so shall the soil never know peace. My soul will rise with the spirit here, and my cry will haunt every household until justice is done." Then he stepped into the forest. His voice faded among the trees. But that night, the village heard laughter carried by the wind. A laughter not of man, but of something that has awakened. From that year, calamities began. Children died in their sleep. Pregnant women bled during childbirth. Strong men collapsed while farming. The once thriving community became a place of mourning. The elders ran to diviners. Sacrifices of goats, rams, and even cows were made. But still, the death continued. Finally, a seer from a distant land was called. After 3 days of silence and fasting, he spoke. "A spirit of vengeance dwells in an nkume. The soul of the innocent man cries for justice. If you do not feed him, he will feed on you. Every first quarter of the year, you must enter the grove with sacrifice, or your households will perish." Fear swallowed the land. From then on, every year before yam seedling touched the earth, the elders gathered in secret at night. They carried offerings into an nkume. No one dares to come out at night to see them. No one dared to ask what the offerings were. Some said goats, some said chickens. Others whispered it was worse. And so peace returned. Fragile, heavy, fearful. Parents warned their children, "Do not walk near an nkume. It is not for human feet." But time changes everything. The world moved on. Elders grew old and died, carrying secrets to the graves. New generations rose who did not understand the land they walked on. Then came the government, buying acres of soil for development. It was then the trouble deepened. Some village touts, greedy for quick money, began to sell land that did not belong to them. And nkume was not spared. Piece by piece, they sold portion of it to real estate companies. Buyers, ignorant of its history, thought they had found treasure. One of them was Mr. Jide, a businessman from the city. He bought many acres for a cheap price, smiling at his fortune. The elders, who still remembered, shook their head but said nothing. Some feared speaking. Others believed silence would protect them. And so Mr. Jide fenced his land, sold parts to the Polytechnic, and life moved on. At least for a while. At first, everything seemed fine. Students came, studying, laughing, and playing football near the forest edge. The land looked harmless, but the spirits never sleep. Each year that passed without the old sacrifices, the cause grew restless. One of the female lecturers finally found her voice, trembling as she asked, "Father, after all we've seen and heard tonight, will this cause ever return again?" The room went still. Even the ticking wall clock seems to pause. Slowly, the Reverend Father stood, the sunlight from the window falling across his white garment. His eyes swept across the faces before him, eyes heavy with fear and doubt. He lifted the rosary in his hand and spoke with quiet authority, each word striking the room like a bell. He said, "My children, the power of evil thrives only where fear is allowed to reign. For years, This land groaned under judgment because the cries of blood were louder than the prayers of the people. But today, he raised his voice slightly. Today, mercy has spoken louder than judgment. The sacrifice of Christ is greater than any sacrifice that was demanded here. He let the words sink in before he continues. His voice now firm and unwavering. Do not fear a returning curse. What God has set free cannot be bound again. The shadows of the past may whisper, but they hold no power where the light of God shines. Hope not fear will guide this campus from now on. Hear me well. The mercy of God has prevailed over every judgment. A soft breeze blew through the open window, stirring the papers on the table. Some staff members wept silently. Others bowed their heads in relief. The atmosphere that once felt suffocating was now strangely light, filled with an unexplainable peace. The Reverend Father gently placed his rosary on the table and added, in a softer tone, this school will no longer be a ground of death, but a ground of destiny. Here, the young shall dream dreams, and their future shall flourish without fear. That is the promise of the Lord. The mercy of God has prevailed over every judgment. Hello guys, this is AC Folktale. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your hearts, don't forget to subscribe, like and share, because many more stories are waiting to hear. See you on our next episode. Bye.